Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Well-Rounded Saxophonist, a podcast that aims to provide valuable information to young saxophonists and music students in a digestible amount of time. I'm Owen Robinson, and today I will be interviewing Dr. Stephen Page, professor of saxophone at the University of Texas at Austin. Dr. Page, it's great to have you on the show today.
Thanks for the invitation, Owen. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. The first question that I wanted to ask is, many saxophonists beginning their undergraduate studies have limited experience playing in quartet, or maybe have never played in a quartet before. Do you have any advice for students who are just starting to play chamber music?
Yeah, of course. I mean, chamber music is just one of the biggest, I think, joys for us as a musician. I think that maybe the student you're describing in the question is sort of me. In high school, I played in a saxophone quartet. You know, we would get ready for our solo and ensemble, 5, 6, 7 rehearsals maybe, play the contest, and that was it. So it was very limited for me. And when I arrived in my undergrad, I got thrust into a really great chamber music scene, and I was working with graduate students too. So it was a bit of a steep learning curve. But I think the biggest thing for a lot of us, and especially amongst friends of mine now, is so many people, almost 100%, I would say, attribute becoming a great musician to their work in chamber music. It's just such a huge opportunity for development, and the earlier we realize that, if we're younger and have those opportunities, whether it's college or even earlier, the better. So thinking about this, chamber music experience as one that's, really a great opportunity for development, we can think about things like achieving high artistry through informed interpretation. And what I mean by that is like using newfound skills in music theory or history, listening not just to maybe the piece we're working on, but to other works by that composer, score study, to bring these 4, 5, 6 people to a higher level together. Like, that's an immense opportunity for growth, right? Similarly, like, we're all working on developing skill sets all the time, whether that's in your lessons or in the practice room, chamber music, band, jazz combo, whatever you're working on. And that sort of new environment of chamber music is a great place to, of course, put those skills to the test and always be working and growing them. But we also sometimes find ourselves in a place we haven't been before. Maybe that's a new instrument. Maybe that's a piece of repertoire that's really going to push our limits with new techniques or counting or any of those things that can be sort of visibly daunting on a lot of this music that we all love. And so again, that's like a great opportunity to sort of push that envelope and toe that line, keep growing, keep living on that growing edge. I think for me, maybe the biggest thing, especially, now playing with my groups, Isaacs, for, gosh, must be close to 15 years now, is that I'm always developing my ear with them, trying to hear in a new way, trying to hear music different to the way I've heard it before, or really honing in on very specific things. And I think that's, quite a tremendous value, because we bring that with us everywhere. Once we hear something a certain way, we usually don't lose that ability to sort of focus on it like that. And then, one thing I always tell, especially younger students, is we're getting into these situations in chamber music where you might have a coaching once a week, perhaps, but you might be rehearsing another 6, 7, however many hours. This is an immense opportunity to work on precision of language. Whether that's expressing ideas musically or things you want to bring to the interpretation, like, obviously very important, right? We can say something very simple, like, we just need to play that louder. Or we can go a lot more, we can go several levels deep on something like that. So that's like very, sort of the basic opportunity to use precise language, but also in how you speak to one another, to make sure that, like, the way we talk about rehearsal ideas and the way we share interpretation and things we'd like to try and what we're aiming towards is in a way that really brings everybody together. We've all had experiences in chamber music that were stressful and that became challenging in one way or another. And I think a lot of that comes to that interaction and figuring out how to work together. Like, how do we all do our best in this situation? So, I encourage everybody to jump in on chamber music as soon as possible, because it's such a rewarding time. So yeah, it's something that was really paramount to my growth, and I wouldn't trade for anything. And even today, I grow every time I play with my quartet or colleagues here at UT. We're always collaborating, and it's kind of the best teacher, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I've found personally that it pushes me as a musician. It's very humbling. seeing playing solo music, if things are going well, I think it's easy to just, be happy with the things that are going well. And then you don't necessarily have somebody around you to like check you when you're practicing. And when you're in a quartet, you have three people who at any given time be like, hey, that note was a little flat. Check that pitch there. How's your read? All those, questions that you ask in rehearsal.
Yeah.
And you see it happen, every which way, I say something to alto or, soprano says something to me, we're always like checking each other. And I find that to be super helpful. It almost like expedites the process of growth.
Absolutely. Yeah, it really does expedite the process. And I think that comes too with that idea of like, a high artistry through informed interpretation. We start to notice like I play alto in my quartet. So I know, even when I'm practicing alone, like I know how Matt Evans, who's in the Pershing zone and he plays tenor in my group, like I know what he's going to do interpretively because I really know him as a musician. I know his intonation tendencies. I know my tendencies, and that like, so when I'm practicing, I know Dana would probably point out like, you're just playing with a little bit too much tail on that release, Stephen. I can sort of anticipate. And I think that's what you're getting at too, is like as we really work together, we learn each other so well, it makes that process go a lot faster, almost nonverbal sometimes.
That's a really great answer. And I definitely like, feel very similarly, but it's like, it's so great to hear it from somebody with so much experience playing in quartet. So my next question, as most saxophonists know, if a reed isn't sealing to the mouthpiece, it probably isn't going to perform well. Do you have any methods for adapting reeds that aren't sealing?
Sure, sure. It's amazing to me how much our lives are dictated by this little piece of Arundo Donax, right? And for anybody listening in, I'd also encourage you to go back to listen to episode 3 with Zach Sheeman. He talks a lot about reed break-in, which I think is sort of the first most important thing we can do. And he talks about his method, which is almost exactly the same as mine. And that's sort of the first line of defense, but reeds are always going to warp, and we just kind of have to accept that. But I do think that the flattening, the backside of the reed, is probably the most important like reed work technique that we can learn. There's a lot of great tools on the market now to sort of address this, which is really great. There weren't as many when I was younger, but I appreciate these things coming out. Like the Reed Geek is really effective. I've got several, and they've definitely sort of changed the game in a certain way. And it's nice to just have that little tiny tool in the case. That being said, I think probably the best way to approach flattening a reed is something maybe slightly more involved, but it just yields a more consistent and better result for me. And that's really all I can say about it. One thing that I really sort of had an affinity for early on, my roommate in college was a bass player. And he, at one point very early on in our time in undergrad, he had to have his bass restored, so they had to pull the top off of it. And when they make cleats, which are tiny wooden squares or sometimes diamonds to sort of address cracking in the back or the ribs or things like this, the way they fit them to the instrument is by putting a piece of sandpaper between the instrument, let's say the top, so it's carved, so it's got a curvature, and the cleat itself. And then they very lightly sand, so you get that perfect fit. And I think that's sort of the best way for us to flatten reeds as well. You can do that with a plate of glass and a piece of sandpaper, maybe 600 grit sandpaper, so it's got an okay bite. It's not too aggressive, but also not not too smooth. And then just lightly rotate the reed in circles on top of that. That'll flatten it out because it's going right against the glass. We know it's going to be perfectly flat. My most recent way of doing this is actually using a diamond plate. And I think this sort of just eliminates the need to take around sandpaper, and it's all in one. And I think that has been really helpful for me, just to be able to put a reed on there, flatten it, and I'm good to go. A little harder to travel with, granted, so I do still love using the Reed Geek for that reason. But every time I flatten a reed, I pretty much immediately notice that response has gotten better, because those little pockets of warpage can really be problematic, whether they're concave or convex. So I think that's a really simple solution. And if you were to not do any reed work whatsoever beyond this one item of flattening the back, I think you'd find reeds got 50% better. You'd get more out of a box that were stage worthy, if you will, and be a little happier in the practice room, which I think we would all like.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you mentioned the other episode with Professor Sheeman, and he, talks about a similar thing with the reed sealing. He'll actually like check his reeds on the neck of the instrument to make sure. I've noticed some players do that. Some players maybe won't even put the ligature on; they'll just hold the reed. I've seen that as well.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have like? I know you have a very involved break-in process. Do you have like kind of like a procedure you use, like when you check reeds?
Check for flatness or in general?
Yeah, just testing reeds in general. Maybe not necessarily when you first pull them out of a box, but like, how you judge whether a reed is performance ready or, what issues it has.
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, like I'm just sort of checking for like potential. That first play through the box of reeds doesn't really mean much beyond that first 20 seconds, but you can pretty much identify like this is probably going to be a good reed and this one's probably going to be a problem. That does happen. And then over time, as I'm playing them in over a break-in period, and I do quite a long break-in as well, that's when I start to really assess. When I start playing on it for a couple minutes at a time, maybe a weekend, that's when I can really tell where it's going to settle. And I think that's sort of the goal of the break-in is to get some stability in like its humidity and its vibrations. And then we can really see what it's going to be like when we take it on stage. So maybe after about 2 weeks of this slow break-in process, and I'm not playing these reeds more than a minute or two during that stage, that's when I might say, all right, I can tell this is a little warped now. It's not sealing on the mouthpiece, or it's just got a little bit, it's lost some of that response, and I'll flatten out that back. And also maybe make an adjustment if it needs it for balance too. But I would say out of a box of 10 reeds, I probably get 8 that I would be willing to take on the stage, and I'm not doing a lot of work to them. I probably flatten the back and maybe do just a little bit of work on the front. But for me, the break-in just makes life a lot better. I find they don't really need as much work to get them to have what I want in a great reed.
Awesome. Yeah. That's a great answer. And 8 out of 10 is that's very good. Yeah, I know oftentimes there are certain reeds that I'll just give up on, they're just like way too hard or just really, are kind of beyond repair. And I do play Van Doren reeds. I've also played D'Addario reeds in the past. I found that the D'Addario reeds played better out of the box, but for me died faster because I wasn't very patient with the break-in process. But
sure. Yeah, and I think that's a big part of it. We're lucky that there are just so many brands of reeds right now that are really great. That's a fortunate thing. Options are good, and once we find something we like and we can settle, then we can sort of learn how to work with that. And I think that your best word there is patience. And that comes too with the break-in process. Like I don't ever want to be in a situation, nor do I want any other instrumentalist to be in a situation where they've only got like one good reed. So got to start that break-in process so they overlap. You've got some that are in the prime of their life, some that are sort of on their way out but may still be good for practicing and such, and then new ones that are sort of on the way in. So, and that doesn't need to be a ton of reeds. That could be 10 reeds, it could be 15, it could be less, just depends on people's playing. It depends on how quickly they go through reeds. I know several saxophonists who I admire greatly who use about 10 reeds a year. They sound fantastic. It doesn't necessarily have to be a huge number of reeds, but it's just how we work with it and how we relate to them.
Absolutely. And it's interesting the spectrum too among saxophonists, people who can get a lot out of very few reeds, and then people who just have so many reeds, and then people who also play like synthetic reeds and who only need just a few of them, maybe 5 or 6 that will last a year if not more. And it's if you can make synthetic reeds work on all the horns, like I applaud that, because I certainly have had my share of success and my share of trouble with synthetic reeds. But
sure, as have we all. But again, like, technology is on the rise, and we're seeing great innovations and step forward, and that's a great thing. Again, options. There's nothing better than options.
So a question that I always ask is, from a teacher's perspective, how do you strike the balance between encouragement and criticism while helping students reach their full potential as an artist?
Yeah, this is a great question. And, for me, I've been teaching for a long time, like over 20 years now. And that's, part of the craft that I think we all develop over time, how to work with people. And people are my occupation. That is what I do. I'm very, very invested in that. And so, for me as a teacher, just speaking strictly to the applied setting and not all the other things that we do as part of our work as teachers and mentors, like, I really want to start from a place of like enablement. Criticism to me is, and I know you're not necessarily meaning it in this way, but it can be a negative sort of connotation in a sense. It's disapproval. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? We're all here to grow and work, but we can think about this job, about helping a student move from point A to point B in a way where we're assessing and identifying areas for growth, and coming up with a plan of action, techniques to employ, in a way that is leaving the individual feeling like they're ready to sort of conquer whatever comes their way. And so I really love that part of the approach because I think that always keeps us in the current of development, the current of growth. Balance is a good word. And this idea that we can be clear about, expectations and hold people to high standards in work while also being, supportive, enabling, these types of things, I think is really important. I think that's where people do their best work. But keeping that sense of enablement alive. A student should leave, hopefully, my studio feeling like they can accomplish anything while being really enthusiastic about that process. There's sort of this trajectory, right? We have to understand where we are. Like, I know where I am as an artist right now. I understand this. But I also know where I want to go, and I'm really excited about getting to that place. And then there's like the process in between. And that's what we really need to be most enthusiastic about. So, leaving a situation where we've just gotten some feedback and feeling like, I just want to go to the practice room right now and put all this new knowledge into place and like keep growing. That's sort of the best outcome for me. And that's really sort of what I base my teaching around.
That's a great answer. I think, and seeing it from the perspective of a student as well, I think we have, in some cases, very specific ideas of where we want to be in, say, a year. Like, for instance, in the fall, like, I want to perform the Denisov Sonata. Like, I want to play the whole thing on stage in front of people. Like, that is a goal that's, like, omnipresent in my head. But the actual, fine detail that I want to put into it is like very daunting. Like, when I'm looking at the piece, not only, things like making sure the counting is right and the, quote unquote math is correct, but also like just all of the musical things and dynamic things that I'm really trying to work on that, can get really heady with a, complex piece like that. It's like very daunting. It's like, I see, like you said, point B. It's like, point B, I can see what that is because I've heard the Denisov played well. But me being the player who's, a junior undergraduate just starting on the piece, for the first time, it's like I'm at point A in a way for this particular goal. And so, it's interesting to think too, like, how can I strike the balance as a student between being too hard on myself or believing in myself that I can play the piece, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, this is a big part of what we do. We spend a lot of time in this small space, usually, practicing away. And a lot of that time is spent evaluating ourselves. And one of the things actually we study a lot here at UT in our Music and Human Learning program is expert practice. Like, what does expert practice look like? So I was recently a part of this where one of our PhD students came in and filmed me practicing, and I just practiced for 30 or 40 minutes, and then he analyzed it, and he gave a great presentation to my studio class too about the good things I was doing, which I was really psyched about. It's good to know I know what I'm doing. But this idea of like, yes, we want to be over there now, point B. What are the steps to get there? And if we just think about that outcome, I just want to play the Denisov. Gosh, that feels daunting when we get in the practice room and go, I have to learn this crazy 10 minutes of music. But if we break it down into, I just need to learn these first, 13 measures. Now we can get some really great work done and probably stay very engaged and positive and feel like we're gaining ground. And I think that's such an important part of our process, is to feel like we're advancing. when you go have a lesson with Professor Luloff, he hasn't heard you for 7 days, so he hears the growth, as do I with my students. But when I hear myself day to day, or you hear yourself day to day in the practice room, sometimes it doesn't feel like growth. We're sort of too close to the problem in that way. So yeah, I think that idea of like breaking it down to something that feels very manageable, and we feel really good about leaving that practice room most days and saying like, I got good work done. Like I can feel that change. I feel more comfortable, or I've accomplished a very clear task of moving a metronome a certain amount of time, or learning X number of new measures. That's a great thing to keep our engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I saw a clip from that presentation online. It was awesome. It was like you were practicing like a passage of a piece or an etude or something, and you made one small, like a blip, like just one note that wasn't correct, and you fixed it. And you immediately stopped. And you're like, no, terrible.
Yeah,
And
terrible.
and you played it again, which is really interesting. I think it's like it's not necessarily being hard on yourself. I feel like that's the kind of colloquial being hard on yourself, but rather I think being hard on yourself is more, in our case, having high expectations. I think there's a connotation that criticizing yourself, stopping yourself while playing, that is coupled with frustration or like stress, but it's actually smart. There's so much science to this that I haven't studied, but my saxophone teacher in high school, Shannon Ford, she was very big on like building myelin, and basically, you're building neural pathways when you practice a skill. And she's like, you learned that wrong really well. Like if you practice something a way ultimately that you don't want to play it, it's still going to come out that way because you've learned it a certain way. That's like what your brain does. And it's so fascinating to me that this being very particular rather than hard on yourself is actually going to help you.
Absolutely. And you're hitting all the buzzwords and all the great things that sort of go along with our work here at MHL about neurology, building myelin, building that fatty insulator for our neural pathways. That's how we know how to hold a pencil. Right? Like you don't even think about it. You just hold it. But when I watched my little nephew trying to hold a crayon or whatever, when he's, 18 months old or 2 years old or whatever, it takes a lot of, concentration. And the same is true when we're practicing. So like really making sure we get it right from the beginning, and then keep reinforcing that, this is paramount to our success. And that's also the way like flow works. If you're interested in the state of flow, which I'm very interested in and I'm researching a lot right now, this idea that, well, we need to get something 100% before we move on is actually counterintuitive. In a flow state, 85% correctness, if you will, is sort of the optimal place to be in terms of it's hard enough to keep us engaged but not boring, so it just keeps us right in that sweet spot of moving forward. And like understanding some of these things about how to practice effectively, and how our brain works and how we can sort of leverage that, and how our brain works as an individual, I will say, because it is different from person to person, that will help us sort of unlock that superpower in a certain way. I'm very confident in my ability, and after many years now, I will say, to learn music very quickly and retain it for a long time. Not always the case. But I think, that idea is really paramount to long-term success and feeling good about what we're doing in the practice room. Nobody wants to leave that space feeling like they wasted their time. It happens, of course. It happens to me. It happens to everybody. But we want to keep that on the higher side of successful versus unsuccessful. And when we close that door, pack up the horn for the night, that we have more days per week that felt really great.
Yeah, for sure. And that's really interesting about the flow state. I didn't quite know there was like a number 85% correctness. It's like a term I've kind of heard, it in both music and like, I've watched documentaries about like climbing and other sports. It's like a term that athletes use. And I think music is this thing that, my entire life I've seen it as almost like a very like spiritual, almost like conceptual part of my life. And I think it was honestly one of my initial like aversions to studying music in college was, do I really want to get that detailed and serious about this? And obviously the answer is yes, but at first it felt to me like I was taking something artistic and spiritual and kind of codifying it in an athletic way. And now I find it completely fascinating, you know, because, once I really started practicing a lot, I found, parallels between music and all of the other academic things I was interested in, like psychology and neurology, and just honestly the learning process in general. So, yeah, I mean, honestly, these are things that I really want to just continue to learn about.
Yeah, there's so much out there to benefit us, and we're seeing a lot of that crossover into the arts, and it's fascinating, endlessly fascinating. So I'll send you a couple links and book suggestions that you
Please
might
do,
enjoy.
please do.
Yeah.
Thank you. How do you prepare for performance?
Sure, like day of, like what's the routine leading up to stepping on stage kind of thing?
Could be anything like when you start a piece or the week of or the day of, and any and all of the above.
Sure. I think with anything like broadly, having enough runway to feel like you're comfortable. If I know I've got a big performance coming up and it's a piece I've never played before, like I want enough time to sort of feel, in really good shape, of course. I think interesting for me over time is like the day of prep and how that's changed. More and more, I find myself not playing very much before a concert. Maybe just sort of warming up the hour before. I'll try not to play much during the day. And, I think the older I get, the more I understand how to deal with my energy, and before a big performance, I, like most people, feel like a little nervous is sort of a typical word. But trying to remind myself that like nervousness is just excitement. It's very rarely someone feeling as though like they're unprepared for this moment. So I try to really harness that idea that like I'm just excited to get out there and share this with people. And we've put a lot of work in. I'm really proud of the result. I love this music. It's important to me, and I just want to share it with these people. And so getting ready for that moment for me is really helpful, and feeling it in that sort of way. And then also like backstage, I think that's sort of the biggest point of like anticipation, right? Waiting. And just like thinking about quartet in our earlier conversation, like I know what my quartet does backstage before we go on stage. We all have our little things. My thing in both situations is I just kind of lightly pace around. I have my instrument out and I'm just sort of, getting comfortable, staying warm, and trying to sort of harness that energy in a good way so I can feel really comfortable and confident as we walk out on stage and, greet the audience well, and feel like I'm ready to sort of share a voice with them.
Yeah, that's great. It's interesting to hear the kind of spectrum of who how people prepare for a performance. Backstage especially. Like I think some people like to sit still. Some people, I personally, I think would pace around. If I'm with my quartet, I'm usually I can picture myself in various backstages, kind of pacing around, checking my reed, noodling just a little bit quietly, making sure the reed responds, etc. Keep the instrument warm. And I usually like to, if I'm playing in chamber music, I like to sort of talk and joke around. With they're my friends, they're my college friends, and it kind of keeps the nerves to a healthy level. Honestly, when I'm performing solo, which is not nearly as much as I play with quartet, I think I stand a lot more still, and I very much like to stay quiet, which is kind of an interesting thing. I've also talked with other students, like master students, about how they've gotten over certain anxiety before performances, and there are all these techniques, breathing exercises, like posing exercises that help. And I wonder if I prepared differently as a soloist, or more similarly to how I prepare as with my quartet, if that would affect my level of nerves or anxiety going into a performance.
Yeah, and I think these things just are always changing over time. And it's a good thing to sort of maybe even purposely experiment with different routines, and trying to find that sweet spot for a given period, granted. But, I think we all just want to get on stage and do our best at sharing what we've prepared and, sort of giving to the audience in that way. And the more comfortable we feel in that moment right before we step off as the door opens, the better it's going to go.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this is, I feel like, a big, important question for a lot of people. What do you like to do outside of music?
Sure. Yeah, we have to be whole people. There are a lot of things I like doing. So I'm married. You might know my wife Jess is also a highly accomplished saxophonist and teacher, and president of NASA, as it were. So we spend, of course, a lot of time doing fun things around Austin. We love checking out restaurants, and there's a great outdoor scene here. So we love exploring that, and we've got a great family of friends here that we love spending time with and sort of adventuring around with. Beyond that, maybe more specifically, I grew up in South Florida, and so I love to fish. I actually just got back from a little fishing trip to Galveston, Texas, and had a great couple days there. And also growing up sort of in like a water sport culture, I loved to wakeboard when I was younger. Don't do much of that here now, but I do love ripping around my neighborhood and on some trails on a one wheel, which is like a electric skateboard of sorts. It's kind of like wakeboarding on pavement or dirt. It's super fun. And, I like to read. I like to explore various things with like home ownership of like upkeep and projects and things like this. So yeah, those are some of the things that I'm sort of into at the moment.
That's awesome. I've also talked with some other saxophonists who find their pets at home to be very therapeutic and time consuming. I know you have a couple cats, right?
Yeah. We have two cats that we adopted once we moved here to Austin, and I had never had a pet in my life. So at 30 years old, I got my first pet. But yeah, they're a good time. They tend to run away and hide when I practice at home, but they're good sports about it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think we rescued two cats. We have a gray tuxedo and a tortoise shell, both American short hairs, and I think they're just so used to instruments being played. We got them at maybe 6-8 months old, and my dad, he was a music minor in college. He plays the bass and the banjo, and we had a piano. I was probably just out of taking piano lessons around when we got the cats, and started playing saxophone probably a couple years before we got them. So they're probably just used to all the noise at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, fishing as well. What did you fish for this past trip?
We were going mostly for speckled trout, which we had several of. And we caught some other things too, some pompano, some sheep's head. And it was a really nice day on the water. I'd been really wanting to do that for some time. So it was great. Had
That's
a really
awesome.
good time.
That's great. And this is kind of a more specific question related to that question, but how do you stay healthy while leading the busy lifestyle of a musician?
Yeah. I mean, our health is really the only thing we have ownership over in a certain sense, and I think it's really important that we take care of ourselves. And that comes in a couple different ways. Of course, physically, what we do is very demanding, and, making sure we're interacting with the instrument well, that's going to ward off any kind of repetitive stress injury. I think that's really important. And certainly a certain, level of fitness is good, and that looks like different things for different people. Unlike your previous guest, I'm not an iron person, but I do like to do a little running. I do like to lift some weights, and I was at the UT gym earlier today, actually, and just trying to keep in a good shape for me. Other people find great success in things like yoga and Pilates or just general outdoor activities, and I think that's all really awesome. And it also offers this opportunity and time for us to sort of disengage in a certain way, and that goes right along with mental health, which is a really big part of what we do. And having the opportunity, I know for me, like if we go for a long walk, like that's where I can really disengage and have some deep thought, and that's really good for me. That's really good for my mental health. Similarly, I really like writing. I think that's a great way to sort of declutter the mind, or some people find really great success in bullet journaling, and that can sort of just ease anxiety levels. But taking care of ourselves, especially with the mental health, is really crucial. And we're fortunate, both you and I, Owen, to be in a university system where we have access to greater levels of help if we need them. And I think that's hugely beneficial for people, whether that's something more long term for maybe some more serious difficulties that someone's going through, or short term to be equipped with some tools that can help manage a busy, strenuous day to day, which we all do experience from time to time. But taking care of ourselves means we get to engage in life and our craft and our work in a really great way.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Yeah, I completely agree. And it's great. I like that I just put general health as the question, and almost usually what follows is mental health, which is kind of influenced by physical health, but is its own sort of thing that's really important. And I think it's being talked about more in the music world, and as well as, you mentioned practicing in a way that will prevent repetitive stress injuries, which has also been a really important topic to me. As I got more serious about music, my dad, who, like I said, was a music minor, he took weekly double bass lessons at Michigan State when he went, and he was always saying, like, when I would practice, he would be like, make sure you're practicing well, don't get hurt. It's like every musician's like biggest fear, he's like, just be very careful. So it's been something I've always been very mindful of. So it's great to hear that get brought up. It's great to hear mental health get brought up. I think there are things that can't be talked about enough.
Yeah, I would agree. It's and you're right. It's nice to see it sort of on the rise as a topic of discussion, in really great ways. Whether that's, inside of a school of music, certainly, we see things like body mapping and Alexander technique to help with our physical health, very specific to what we do as instrumentalists. And then, of course, like mental health resources that are there for us. I know at UT we have a very specific counselor for the College of Fine Arts, which is amazing. He's such a great resource for our students. And, just being able to feel like this is something that is, easy to talk about, or it should be, much more comfortable to talk about amongst peers, friends, teachers, and students, because it's so important. I want all of my students to have a great relationship with the instruments in both of those ways. And, by taking it as a part of our, daily routine, making sure we're taking care of ourselves, the longer we get to do it.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening. This concludes episode 4 of The Well-Rounded Saxophonist, featuring special guest Dr. Stephen Page, professor of saxophone at the University of Texas at Austin. The music you heard in this episode was composed by Dorothy Chang, performed by Zachary Costello, alto saxophone, and Guillaume Ra, piano. I'm Owen Robinson, and this has been The Well-Rounded Saxophonist. Thank you for listening, and until next time, remember to practice smart and stay healthy.